The video series intro script Sin, the Breach of Covenant. In the first century, when Yeshua taught about sin, he wasn't talking about vague moral failures or religious taboos. He was talking about something far more concrete, far more relational, and far more covenantal. Sin was understood exactly the way the Hebrew and Greek scriptures define it: khatta in Hebrew and hamartia in Greek, both meaning one thing: missing the mark. But here's the key: a mark can only be missed if there is a relationship that sets the target in the first place. Sin is not an accident. Sin is not a mystery. Sin is breach of expectation inside a relationship. And every relationship has expectations. That's why the very definition of sin requires covenant. Without a covenant, there can be wrongdoing, but there cannot be sin in the biblical sense, because sin is breach of relationship, breach of trust, breach of loyalty, and ultimately breach of the covenant with Yahweh. When Scripture speaks of sin vertically, between man and Elohim, it always points back to the same foundation. Yahweh alone sets the expectations for his covenant people, and he wrote those expectations down as Torah at Mount Sinai. Israel said, "All that Yahweh has spoken we will do." That agreement created the covenant relationship. That covenant relationship establishes the target, and therefore, missing that target, breaking those commands, is sin. This is why the Apostle John says plainly, sin is lawlessness. It is not complicated. Lawlessness means stepping outside the boundaries of the covenant. It is disloyalty to the relationship. And Yahweh himself declares the consequence: the being that sins shall die. Vertical breach brings death because the covenant relationship defines life. Yeshua the Messiah entered this world for one reason: to expose the works of the adversary, lawlessness, and to restore the covenant relationship Israel had shattered. He is the walking, talking Torah made flesh. He didn't change the target. He demonstrated how to hit it. He didn't lower the standard. He embodied it. Everything he taught drove his disciples back to obedience, back to covenant loyalty, back to the Father's expectations. But Scripture also speaks of horizontal sin, breaches between people. These failures may not break a Torah command, yet they still break trust. Abraham's deception with Abimelech, Jacob's dispute with Laban, these were not covenant-breaking sins in the vertical sense, but they were breaches of relationship that damaged peace, trust, and unity. When we violate one another's expectations, we miss the mark of the human relationship. When we violate Yahweh's expectations, we miss the mark of the divine relationship. And when a person in covenant commits murder, adultery, theft, now two breaches occur, one against man and one against Elohim. But what causes these breaches? Where does sin actually begin? Scripture makes that answer unmistakably clear. It begins with desire. James tells us that no one can blame Yahweh for temptation. The breach originates when a person is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Desire conceives sin, and sin brings forth death. This is first century logic, straight from Yeshua's own worldview. Sin does not begin in the hands, it begins in the heart. Yeshua called this out repeatedly. The fightings and strivings among disciples come from pleasures that battle in your members. People ask wrongly because they want to spend it on their own pleasures. The 10th commandment, do not covet, strikes at the very root of every other transgression. Coveting leads to stealing. Coveting leads to adultery. Coveting leads to idolatry. A heart not submitted to Yahweh's expectations will always produce breach. The proud resist the covenant. The double-minded man wants Yahweh's blessings while clinging to his own desires. That man will always miss the mark because he is living with two targets, two loyalties, two masters. And Yeshua said plainly, no one can serve two masters. This is why Scripture says, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Once the expectation is known, refusing to walk in it becomes breach. Knowledge that is not acted upon becomes rebellion. This entire series will unpack these truths. We will examine sin not as the church has culturally defined it, but as Scripture defines it from the very beginning. A breach of covenant relationship rooted in desire that rebels against Yahweh's expectation. We will show how Yeshua revealed the path of restoration, not by abolishing the Torah, but by bringing people back into obedience to it. We will expose the difference between vertical breach and horizontal breach. We will trace desire from temptation to transgression. We will show why the wages of sin are death, why the remedy is obedience, and why the covenant is the only framework in which sin makes sense. And we will do it from the worldview of Yeshua, the Torah keeping Messiah who came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, calling them and all who would join them back into covenant faithfulness. This is the series Sin, Missing the Mark, Breaking the Covenant, and How Yeshua Restores the Relationship. Let's begin. For more Torah-based teaching resources and curriculum, visit biologosacademy.com. Making the Kingdom Great Again, Matthew 5:19. Mr. Jim Barber, aka Mr. Batman, founder, BioLogos Academy.